Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today's video, I'm going to be going over some Geissele trigger upgrades for the Tavor SAR. For anyone who isn't aware, bullpup triggers by nature aren't the best, whether that be the Tavor SAR, the Steyr AUG, and others, due to the fact that the trigger shoe is here and the trigger mechanism is back here, and then there's a long bar along with linkage that connects them. So they will never feel quite as crisp as you will get with an AR trigger, or even probably as close as maybe even say an AK trigger. That said, this is the only bullpup rifle that I've ever owned and only one I have any experience with. Not even just in ownership, but even having hands-on experience with, or even holding and being able to feel the trigger. So all that statement was based off things that I've read and things that I've heard, but it makes sense that that's why it would not feel quite as crisp. My Tavor SAR, I picked this up just about short of 2 years ago, a little bit after the pandemic started. Got a really good deal on it. It was secondhand, but it did come with the Geissele Super Sabra trigger pack along with it. I think altogether I got it for $1,300, not including the optic on it. So was really happy with that price, especially when you consider the Geissele trigger pack. I did also have the OEM trigger with it, and until just a couple months ago, I never actually tried feeling how it felt with the OEM trigger pack, though I had read plenty on the forums that the SAR trigger is absolutely horrible. Super heavy, feels like crap. So I put it in there and I wanted to feel it, and it is. It's horrible. And I know some people will say that there's nothing wrong with the SAR trigger. They've had it for years. They've put thousands of rounds through it. They don't see any problem with it. And that's fine. I mean, if that works for you and you're happy with the trigger, go with whatever makes you happy. I myself have become, as I said in other videos, a little bit of a trigger snob, going from upgrading from just enhanced PSA fire control groups in my beginner ARs, and then stepping up to LaRue's MBT1S, 1BT2S, and put ALG triggers in my old SLR, and also in my PSA AKV. Once you really feel a good trigger, and then especially when you step up to like a Geissele SSAE or an SSP, which I do have in two of my other ARs, and once you really feel what a good trigger feels like, it is hard to go back to the other ones. And I don't really think it's one of those things that are just a nice to have. Sure, it's not absolutely necessary. I mean, you look at all of the troops and soldiers across all over the place that have OEM factory mil-spec triggers in them. They can do plenty fine with them, and that's true, you can. But what the trigger can make you do is help you be more accurate, and help you be more accurate faster. And all of those things, it's makes it a more enjoyable shooting circumstance. And then if obviously if you were a combat or in police, whatever it may be, more accurate fire and faster fire is definitely a pro. Anything that can give you a leg up in a situation that you may be in combat, it's a good thing. So in my personal opinion, I do feel that trigger upgrades are definitely worth it. Geissele AR triggers go on sale for quite a bit. I know during Black Friday and even just a couple weeks ago, you were able to find the more, the SSAEs and the series for about $160, $170. Typically they go for about $240. So that was a really good deal. So if you want to wait until one of those sales go on, you can find one for cheaper every once in a while on AR15.com's equipment exchange. You can get good deals on them, which is actually how I got my two Geissele triggers for my other ARs. But going back to the SAR, put the OEM trigger back in here. Tried sticking my Wheeler trigger pull scale on there, and as you see, this thing here tops out at 8 pounds. I can tell you that I don't know what it pulls at, but it's definitely a lot more than 8 pounds, because I top that off and pull on it, and it still takes a little bit more before it finally breaks. It is really it's really heavy, and I don't like it at all. When I go through this video, I'm not going to go through how to replace the trigger pack or the lightning bow. And the lightning bow is something that I just got my hands on just recently. I've wanted one of these for quite a while. later in the video, I'll go through why I decided to upgrade to the trigger bow, but I'm not going to go through the replacement of this because there already are some videos out there that cover it. Over on the IWI YouTube channel, he goes through in great length how to completely break this thing down and remove all the way to the point where you need to remove the barrel, which is where you need to get to in order to change the trigger itself. In addition to that, over on Very Traumatic's YouTube channel, he specifically goes through how to replace the trigger and go with the Geissele lightning bow. So being that this has been covered in greater depth than I would even know, because I have yet to change this out. I will include links in the description to those two videos, but for the intent and purposes of this video, I'm just going to go over some of my perspective, go over some trigger pull weights and differences that I feel between them, so that maybe that can help somebody out there who's thinking about upgrading their trigger pack or trigger bow, if it's going to be worth it to them or if it's something they want to go spend their money on. So before I go any further into the gun handling, I do want to show that this is a safe weapon. As you can see, there's no magazine in it. And then look in the charging handle, you can see that there is no round in the chamber. So going back to how the trigger feels, I will put the Geissele trigger pack back in here. And while that's not bad at all, and it does greatly reduce the weight, one of the things that I was not super happy with and why I was always tempted to pick up the trigger bow itself is the feel of the trigger. It has a really spongy feel to it, and it's almost like a three-stage trigger. Now, you don't feel it as much with the OEM trigger pack, and I'll go through that here in a minute in the video, but it's just, there's a lot of slop right here. It probably has to do with the linkage, and from what I had read, the lightning bow itself really takes out the sloppiness, and again, you don't feel it so much, at least the sponginess that I'm going to bring up when I put the Super Sabra trigger pack in there, but it also feels very spongy. That's not something that I was ever really happy with. It's not really a deal breaker, because with the Super Sabra trigger pack, the pull weight is reduced so much. It's just when I am really an AR guy, and when you're used to a good AR trigger, it's an adjustment, let's put it that way, and it's just something that I myself want to see if I can improve. I do want to see and very interested to find out if this does really make that much of a difference between the different geometry. And of course, Bill Geissele, he is a trigger genius, and everything that I've read so far and reviews that I've watched says that it does help out with that sponginess. And we will see. One of my previous videos, I covered the ALG trigger replacement or upgrade in the IWI Geissele Ace. And I think that, due to the nature of an AK trigger, because at its heart it is still an AK, same thing there. You're never going to get it quite as crisp as an AR. But, I'm not trying to make it like an AR, just trying to get a little bit better feel. Part here costs about $100. Of course, they had to buy the barrel wrench from IWI. That was about $15. So we'll see if it's worth it. One thing I will say, even though I mentioned I am not going to break this thing down or video me breaking it down, I do just want to say that one of the key things that I've read, so for anybody who's thinking about switching out their trigger, one of the key things is that you have to make sure, and I highly encourage you to go through and watch the videos on how to do it, but when you unlock this barrel, before you unlock this barrel, you have it broken down further, and before you even try unlocking this, you need to make sure that you have the charging handle mechanism out of here. And they do talk about in the video, especially over on the IWI YouTube channel, that if you do not remove the charging handle before you unlock the barrel, you will damage it, and it will probably have to be replaced. And I think you can even do damage to the barrel itself. Before I go ahead and put the Geissele Super Sabra trigger pack back in there real quick, I will go ahead and show you what it's like with the Wheeler trigger pull gauge, and how heavy it really is. If you watch the yellow arrow as you go through, as I go through and pull, there it topped out, still pulling, finally broke, and we have bottomed this thing out. So super heavy. I had read or heard somewhere from people that have gauges that go up higher that the trigger pulls around 10 or 11 pounds. Obviously I can't confirm that, but it is definitely more than the 8 pounds that this tops out at. So let me go ahead and put the Geissele Super Sabra trigger pack back in. Now that I've pulled the OEM trigger pack out of here, I figured I'd show you a side-by-side of what they look like. Nothing really jumps out at you a whole lot. They do look very, very similar, but whatever magic Bill Geissele has figured out in order to make this thing smoother and better, it is greatly so, which I will show you here once I get this bad boy reinstalled. Okay, got the Geissele Super Sabra trigger pack reinstalled, and I will go through some trigger pulse weight tests. It's about 4.5 pounds. Again, about 4.5 pounds. That was a little closer to 5 pounds. So I think on average this thing pulls about 4.5 pounds, which is a huge improvement over the factory one, which if you remember, it very easily topped out my scale at 8 pounds. So now I'm going to get a little bit further into what, even though you have the lighter pull, things that I don't like about the factory OEM trigger shoe. So when you put the Super Sabra trigger pack in there, you are left with a very spongy feeling trigger. And I almost want to say that this is like it's like a 3-stage trigger, because you have take up, you have some very light slop, some take up, and then you hit a wall, you pull a little bit more, and then there's another wall. So slop loose, slight slop to first wall, a little bit more to second wall, and then the trigger breaks, and then the reset. Reset's not horrible. It is tactile, but that sponginess is something that I'm hoping that the lightning bow does away with. I have went ahead and put the trigger pull scale on the trigger with the the Geissele Super Sabra trigger pack in there, and those 3 stages that I just mentioned, it is almost like, at least when I measured it, this here was about 1 pound, that initial take up. The second wall was about went up to 3 pounds, and then when it breaks at 4.5 pounds. So really hoping to see if the travel altogether, the sponginess feeling, if we can get that corrected with the Super Sabra lightning bow. I'm going to go ahead and break this thing down. I'll go through the video, watching the 2 videos that I have mentioned on the IWI website, YouTube channel, along with the other one. And again, I will include links for that in the description so you guys can see how that's all done. Step by step, it is a little more in depth than just doing an AR trigger. So I'll see you back when I get the trigger bow installed.